one of the most fascinating, mind-blowing and frankly unbelievable stories in the world of coin collecting, the kind of story that makes both seasoned numismatists and casual treasure hunters perk up and lean forward, the tale of how a humble 1979 1-cent coin, the smallest denomination in U.S. currency, could end up being valued at an astonishing $1 million, all because of a series of errors, mistakes, quirks, and bizarre circumstances during its creation and circulation that transformed it from just another copper-colored penny into a true collector's dream and a headline-grabbing numismatic legend. So let's settle in, because we're going to unpack not just what makes this particular coin so valuable, but also explore the different kinds of minting errors that can occur, the reasons behind them, the market forces that drive prices sky high, and the possibilities that might explain how something as ordinary as a 1979 cent could achieve such extraordinary worth. Starting with the fact that every coin the U.S. Mint produces goes through a meticulous and high-speed manufacturing process involving the preparation of blank planchets, feeding them through coining presses, striking them with dies carrying the obverse and reverse designs, and then ejecting them to be counted and bagged. But despite the advanced machinery and strict quality controls, errors can and do happen. And when they happen in just the right way, they can create a numismatic rarity so special that collectors will pay enormous sums to own it. Now, in the case of the mythical $1 million 1979 1 cent, we have to imagine a scenario where multiple layers of rarity stack together, because a single minor error, while interesting, usually won't fetch 7 figures, but combine a dramatic, visually obvious error with extreme scarcity, historical significance, and perfect condition. And you've got the formula for a coin that crosses into that elite price range. So what could those errors be? Well, one possibility is a double die obverse, where the die itself was improperly manufactured so that the design appears doubled on the coin, a feature that can be most visible in the lettering of Liberty, the date, 1979, or the motto, In God We Trust. And if this doubling is sharp and prominent, it's an instant collector magnet. But if our coin also happened to be struck on the wrong planchet, say, a planchet intended for a dime, or even a foreign coin of smaller size or different composition, then we'd have a wrong metal, wrong size error that immediately amplifies the intrigue, because such coins not only look different, they're the result of an incredible slip-up in the mint's planchet handling systems, and if the strike was off-center, maybe by 50% or more, so that part of the design is missing and part of the blank planchet is visible, that would add yet another layer of uniqueness. Now picture that all these errors happen on a single coin and it somehow escapes detection, gets released into circulation, and then decades later is discovered in pristine condition, perhaps because it was pulled from circulation early and stored away in a drawer or collection where it avoided wear, leaving it with the sharp details and luster collectors crave, and you begin to see why the market might go wild for it. Because the coin's value is not just in the metal or the face value but in its rarity, condition, and the story behind it. Now with 1979 specifically, we're in an interesting time in U.S. coinage history, as the cent was still being made primarily of copper, weighing 3.11 grams with a 95% copper and 5% zinc composition. But inflation and rising metal prices in the late 1970s and early 1980s were pushing the mint toward changing that composition to a mostly zinc core with copper plating. A switch that officially happened in 1982, so a 1979 cent is part of the last era of full copper pennies, which already makes them more appealing to some collectors. And if you add in the possibility of transitional errors, such as a coin accidentally struck on a planchet of the wrong composition, then you could have a 1979 cent made from an experimental metal, making it even rarer. Another factor could be a misaligned die, where the hammer die and anvil die don't line up perfectly, causing the design to shift in a way that's noticeable but still shows full details on parts of the coin. And of course there's the dramatic broad strike error, where the retaining collar fails and the coin is struck without its usual rim, causing it to spread out larger than normal and look almost like a small medallion. Now let's imagine this coin has a repunched mint mark, where the mint mark letter, such as D for Denver or S for San Francisco, was hand-punched into the die multiple times in slightly different positions, creating a shadow effect that's fascinating to examine under magnification. Combine that with a proof strike, coins specially made for collectors with polished dies and planchets, struck multiple times for sharpness. And maybe it's even a proof from the San Francisco Mint that somehow got all these errors, because normally proofs are inspected with extreme care and error proofs are exceedingly rare, so having a proof with major dramatic errors is like winning the numismatic lottery. The potential backstory for such a coin could involve a moment during 1979 when the Mint was striking both regular circulation cents and special sets, possibly swapping dies or planchets between presses for different denominations, and in the rush to meet production deadlines, a mix-up occurred, sending the wrong planchet into the press, the die alignment slightly off, and the die itself already flawed with doubling or a crack, producing a single one-of-a-kind specimen that defied the odds and slipped into a bag bound for a bank, where it mingled with millions of ordinary cents until someone with a sharp eye spotted something odd. Now, when that happens and the discovery is made public, the hype builds quickly, because collectors and dealers know that in the numismatic market, unique items command whatever price the highest bidder is willing to pay, and if two or more wealthy collectors decide they must have it, bidding wars can push the price into the stratosphere, which is how a single cent could be valued at or sold for around $1 million. Especially if it's certified by a top grading service like PCGS or NGC as genuine, and in a top grade such as MS68 or Proof 70. The story then spreads through coin magazines, auction catalogs, online forums, and eventually mainstream media, which adds another layer of allure as people outside the hobby are fascinated by the idea that a penny could be worth a fortune, fueling further demand and perhaps inspiring more people to check their change, and in that environment, even speculative hype can contribute to high valuations, especially if the coin's provenance, its documented history, is compelling. Maybe it was found in a sealed bankroll from 1979, or inherited from a grandparent who worked at the Mint, or even purchased unknowingly for face value at a garage sale, all of which add romance to the tale. And when we examine the possibilities of errors that could stack on one coin to reach this level, we can consider off-metal strikes like a cent struck on a silver dime planchet, producing a smaller, lighter coin with a silvery appearance, or a cent struck on an aluminum planchet leftover from experimental runs in the early 1970s, which are already ultra-rare and sometimes controversial due to government retrieval efforts, or even a mule error, where the obverse of a cent is paired with the reverse of another denomination entirely, such as a dime or nickel, creating a hybrid coin never intended for release, which would instantly become one of the most famous errors in U.S. history. Then there's the potential for die breaks, sometimes called cuds, where a piece of the die breaks away and leaves a raised blob of metal on the coin, and if this break is large and dramatic, it makes the coin's appearance unforgettable. All these factors can be expanded with more detail. For instance, in the minting process, each die is subjected to extreme pressure and repetitive strikes, and over time, microfractures or hubbing errors can occur, and if these aren't caught early, they can produce a small run of coins with the same defect, which, if coupled with other unusual circumstances, can result in just a handful of coins existing with a very specific combination of traits, making them incredibly desirable to specialists who collect by era type, year, or even die variety. And the 1979 cents place in history, coming at the tail end of the copper era, in the same year the Susan B. Anthony dollar debuted, and during a period of high inflation, adds to the intrigue because collectors love coins that can be tied to significant historical moments. Plus, the aesthetics of the coin matter too, as a well-struck, lustrous example with deep, attractive color or toning can be more appealing than a dull, spotted coin, even with the same errors. So when all of these factors, era type, rarity, condition, historical context, and collector demand, align, the result can be an astronomical valuation that seems unbelievable to outsiders but perfectly logical within the numismatic community. If you thought the story of the 1979 1 cent worth $1 million was astonishing, just wait until you hear about the legendary 1961 D Lincoln cent that in certain circles has been whispered about as commanding a jaw-dropping $3 million, an amount so massive for such a tiny piece of copper that it almost feels like a tall tale until you start to dig into the possibilities, the errors, the historical context, and the collector psychology that could push the value of a coin from 1 cent to the price of a luxury mansion. So let's rewind to 1961, a time when the United States Mint was churning out billions of Lincoln cents, still in their classic bronze composition of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, weighing the familiar 3.11 grams and bearing the enduring design of Abraham Lincoln's bust on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. But this was also a period when the Denver Mint, marked by that small D mint mark just below the date, was running presses at incredible speeds to meet the demands of a booming economy, and whenever production is pushed to extremes, the potential for minting errors rises, opening the door for extraordinary numismatic rarities. Now imagine a scenario where the 1961 cent in question was the result of not just one, but multiple coinciding mint mishaps that produced a coin so unique it became the stuff of legend. Perhaps starting with a dramatic double die obverse so strong that the doubling on the date and inscriptions could be seen with the naked eye, the kind of bold doubling that instantly commands attention from error specialists. But let's not stop there. Suppose this coin was also struck on a transitional planchet, maybe even a leftover from the experimental alloy tests of the late 1950s. Or perhaps a foreign coin blank accidentally fed into the press, giving it an unusual color, weight, or ring when dropped. Factors that sharp-eyed collectors prize. Now picture that the strike itself was off-center by just enough to reveal a crescent of blank metal while still showing the full date and mint mark, making it both odd-looking and informative. Then add the possibility of a repunched mint mark, where the D was punched into the die more than once in slightly different positions, creating a shadow or doubling effect under magnification. And if you really want to stack the rarity deck, imagine that this cent was struck with a reverse die intended for a proof coin, giving it unusually sharp details and mirrored fields, despite being struck for circulation, an accident that would leave even veteran graders doing a double take. But what could drive such a coin's value into the multi-million range is not just the errors themselves, but the coin's singularity. If only one exists with this exact combination of traits, its rarity would be absolute, and in numismatics, absolute rarity plus high desirability equals sky-high value. Now factor in the condition, because even the most dramatic error loses some of its magic if it's worn down from decades of pocket change use. But if this particular 1961 cent was pulled from circulation almost immediately, perhaps by a bank teller or mint employee who noticed something odd, and then carefully preserved in a climate-controlled environment for 60-plus years, it could retain its original red luster, with no signs of handling, grading out as MS68, or even MS69 read by the likes of PCGS or NGC, a level of perfection that is rare even among normal coins of that year, and nearly unheard of for an error coin. In such a case, the coin's provenance could further enhance its appeal. Maybe it came from a sealed bag of Denver cents discovered in a bank vault decades later, or from a private collection whose owner had ties to the mint. Stories like these add mystique and fuel bidding wars among high-end collectors. Now, the market dynamics for such a piece are fascinating because ultra-wealthy collectors in the numismatic elite often compete fiercely for one-of-a-kind trophies, and when two determined bidders decide they must own the same coin, the auction price can skyrocket beyond rational expectations. $3 million might seem insane to the average person, but in the rare coin world, it's simply the price of securing a singular piece of history that no one else can ever possess. And the 1961 cents context in U.S. coinage history adds another layer, coming during the Cold War era when American coin designs were stable but minting technology was evolving, making dramatic errors less common than in earlier decades. Thus any such major blunder from this period becomes even more of a standout. Plus the fact that the Denver Mint was responsible for huge production numbers means finding something unique in the flood of ordinary strikes is like pulling a diamond from a gravel pit, all of which makes the idea of a flawless, wildly errored 1961 cent not just plausible as a high-value collectible, but irresistible as a conversation piece and status symbol in the numismatic community. And that's how a humble penny minted over 6 decades ago could, in the right circumstances, be worth more than most people's homes, a testament to the incredible intersection of history, chance, and human fascination with rarity. And when we continue peeling back the layers of intrigue surrounding this hypothetical yet entirely possible 1961 D Lincoln cent valued at a staggering $3 million, we can start imagining the kinds of precise mechanical and human circumstances that could have created it in the first place, because in 1961, the Denver Mint was using high-speed coining presses that relied on human operators to monitor feed hoppers, replace dies, and inspect output, and any lapse, even for a moment, could result in a rare and spectacular mint error. So suppose, for example, that in the middle of a normal cent production run, a foreign planchet, perhaps a blank intended for a Canadian cent or a small South American denomination, accidentally got mixed into the supply bin, and that planchet had a different size or metallic composition, which not only altered the color and weight of the final coin but also caused it to strike slightly differently, creating sharper relief in some areas and mushier details in others, making the coin instantly suspicious to anyone who saw it closely. Now combine that with the possibility that the working die used to strike the obverse had already developed a hub doubling during preparation, meaning every coin it struck displayed clear, strong doubling in the date, the word Liberty, and the motto, In God We Trust. And then imagine the press collar, which normally shapes the coin's rim and keeps the metal from spreading out too far, malfunctioned during that strike, allowing the coin to spread into an unusually broad, smooth-edged shape while still retaining most of the design. This broad strike, combined with the wrong planchet and doubled die, already sets it apart from anything else. But then picture the reverse die being a leftover from a proof striking batch, perhaps because a mint worker accidentally swapped it in, giving the fields a mirrored, reflective finish and making Lincoln's memorial details so crisp that every tiny column and statue stands out like a miniature engraving. A visual contrast so stark that even an untrained eye would know something was unusual, and the cherry on top could be that the mint mark, D, itself was punched incorrectly, perhaps too high or too low, or punched more than once, creating a repunched mint mark. Variety that error collectors covet. Now, if all this happened in a single strike, and the coin was immediately noticed and pocketed by someone who recognized its peculiarity, it could have been spared the wear and tear of normal circulation, tucked away in a desk drawer or safe deposit box for decades until being rediscovered in nearly perfect mint state, glowing with original copper-red brilliance, the kind of surface preservation that makes grading services salivate and collectors open their wallets wide. And once word got out, whether through a major auction house like Heritage or Stack's Bowers, or via an explosive story in a coin magazine, the buzz could push prices higher and higher. Because here's the thing, rarity alone doesn't guarantee astronomical value, but rarity combined with beauty, dramatic visible errors, and impeccable condition creates an irresistible trifecta. And when such a coin also comes with a juicy backstory, perhaps tied to a specific mint worker or a certain day in Denver mint history, it becomes not just a collectible but a tangible piece of living history, something that bridges the gap between industrial accident and artistic curiosity. And that's exactly the kind of object that can spark multi-million-dollar bidding wars among elite collectors who view these coins not as pocket change, but as cultural treasures. So, while to most people a penny will always be just a penny, in the rarefied era of high-end numismatics, the right 1961 D cent could rival fine art or rare gemstones in value, and this possibility keeps treasure hunters searching, coin roll hunters peering into their change jars, and the dream alive that the next little copper disc you pull from your pocket could be your ticket to unimaginable wealth. And now we turn our attention to another jaw-dropping tale from the world of numismatics, this time to the enigmatic and highly coveted 1974 D Lincoln cent, a coin that under the right set of circumstances has been known to fetch offers in the neighborhood of $2 million, and while that figure might sound absurd to someone outside the coin collecting community, those familiar with the history of U.S. mint operations in the early 1970s know exactly why this date and mint mark combination holds such legendary status. Because 1974 was the year of the famous aluminum cent experiment, when the U.S. Mint, responding to rising copper prices, produced over 1 million prototype 1-cent pieces made from aluminum in an effort to reduce costs. These coins were intended to be distributed to Congress for review, and though most were later recalled and destroyed, a tiny number slipped into private hands, and among the most elusive of these are the examples struck at the Denver Mint, which officially never produced aluminum cents at all, making any genuine 1974D aluminum cent not only a spectacular rarity, but a controversial piece of history. Now, if you imagine that one of these extremely rare experimental planchets somehow made it into the production line in Denver, and was struck with standard Lincoln cent dies, producing a silvery, lightweight coin unlike anything the public had ever seen, you start to understand the feverish collector demand, because we're talking about a coin that is both a wrong planchet error and an unofficial experimental strike rolled into one. Now suppose this coin also carried additional minting quirks, perhaps a strong double die obverse visible in the date and inscriptions, or a repunched D mint mark from when mint marks were still applied by hand to working dies. These varieties on their own can command premiums, but on an aluminum planchet they would be nothing short of breathtaking, and then factor in that the coin might have been preserved in pristine condition from the moment it was struck, perhaps kept by a mint employee or given as a keepsake before the recall orders came down, avoiding circulation entirely and retaining its bright, silvery sheen without the spotting or oxidation that aluminum can sometimes suffer. If such a coin were to surface today and be authenticated by a top-grading service as genuine, and there have been cases of similar rarities causing legal disputes, it would immediately make headlines, ignite debates in the numismatic community, and draw deep-pocketed bidders from around the world, because the combination of extreme rarity, historical importance, and condition is irresistible to high-end collectors. And when you consider that Denver was not even supposed to have struck a single aluminum cent, the existence of one would mean it is effectively unique, giving it an absolute rarity that pushes it into the multi-million-dollar territory. Now the backstory alone adds intrigue. The political climate of the 1970s, the economic pressures on the mint, the secrecy around the experimental coins, and the fact that most were destroyed under government order make any surviving example a relic of a fascinating chapter in American coinage. And if the coin in question also displayed an additional striking error like an off-center alignment, a broad strike without a collar, or even a mule pairing with a reverse die from another denomination, it would be a once-in-a-lifetime find, the kind of thing that would not only sell for an astronomical price but also become an instant centerpiece of any advanced collection. And that's how a simple 1-cent piece dated 1974D could leap from pocket change to a $2 million treasure, a transformation driven by an incredible blend of history, accident, secrecy, and the eternal human desire to own something that no one else on earth possesses. Continuing the saga of this remarkable 1974D cent that could command a staggering $2 million, we have to dive even deeper into the mechanics, the backstory, and the web of coincidences that could have made such a coin possible, because in the numismatic world, value is built on the pillars of rarity, condition, historical context, and demand, and this coin would score a perfect mark in every category, starting with the fact that in 1974, the U.S. Mint's aluminum cent program was meant to be strictly limited to Philadelphia strikes for testing purposes, and yet we know from documented cases that a handful of 1974D aluminum cents somehow exist, a situation so rare that even the Smithsonian Institution holds one under tight control, and the appearance of any others is met with immediate scrutiny. Now imagine that our hypothetical $2 million example is not just an aluminum cent but one that bears a visible, dramatic error. Perhaps a double-struck obverse where Lincoln's profile appears ghosted slightly to one side of itself, or an off-center strike where part of the date is missing yet still clearly readable enough to confirm the year and the D mint mark, adding visual drama to the coin's already legendary status. And perhaps the planchet itself came from an early batch of aluminum that was slightly different in composition, maybe containing trace elements of magnesium or manganese, giving it a subtly different tone or surface reflectivity. Something that would show up under metallurgical analysis and set it apart as a variant within a variant. Now, consider the journey this coin might have taken, Perhaps it left the Denver Mint in the pocket of a visiting official, a tester, or a mint worker, long before the recall orders came down, and it ended up in a small private collection where it was admired occasionally but never handled enough to leave a single fingerprint or scratch, tucked away in a protective envelope or case for decades. Only to emerge in the modern era when interest in rare coins and record-breaking auction sales was at an all-time high. The very act of discovery would set the collecting world buzzing, because unlike many rare coins that have multiple known examples, a unique or near-unique 1974D aluminum cent would be a true one-of-one trophy piece, and when rarity is absolute, the normal rules of pricing fall away, replaced by the unrestrained will of the wealthiest bidders. And if two or more such bidders have both the means and the burning desire to claim it, the result is a price escalation that can easily cross into the multi-million-dollar range, especially when bolstered by certification from PCGS or NGC at a grade like MS67 or MS68, and with an auction house like Heritage, Stack's Bowers, or Legend Rare Coin Auctions publicizing the sale. The story would quickly cross over into mainstream news, sparking articles about the penny worth $2 million, and inspiring casual coin hunters everywhere to dig through their change, adding a cultural impact factor that actually reinforces the coin's value because of the added fame. And then there's the legal intrigue. Because aluminum cents from 1974 exist in a gray area between experimental pieces and official issues, their sale sometimes draws attention from the U.S. Mint or Secret Service, creating an aura of danger and controversy that only fuels collector desire, as the forbidden fruit effect takes hold. And a coin with such a story isn't just metal and design, it's a piece of American history tied to economics, politics, and the secrecy of government operations, making ownership feel like holding a tangible fragment of a hidden chapter in our nation's past. And so we see how a coin minted for 1 cent could become worth $2 million, not by accident alone, but by the perfect alignment of mistake, mystery, preservation, and human fascination with the unattainable. Now let's move into another fascinating chapter of rare cent lore, this time focusing on the elusive 1971D Lincoln cent that, under the right combination of minting anomalies and collector circumstances, could reach an eye-popping value of around $1 million. And while at first glance a Denver minted penny from 1971 seems like one of the most common coins imaginable, billions were struck that year. The magic in numismatics is that even the most ordinary date can hide a needle in a haystack rarity if the conditions align perfectly. So let's rewind to the Denver Mint in 1971, a time when presses were churning out countless bronze cents in the classic 95% copper, 5% tin and zinc composition, each weighing 3.11 grams. And in that immense production run there's always room for a small number of extraordinary errors to slip through. Perhaps our $1 million example began life as a dramatic double die of verse, where the master die hubbing process produced bold, visible doubling in the date, the liberty, and the in God we trust motto, the kind of doubling so strong you can see it without magnification. And while such a variety already has value to specialists, imagine if this coin was also struck on a transitional planchet, say, a leftover from a foreign coin order with a slightly different metal content and color, giving it an unusual tone right from the start. Then add in the possibility of a broad strike or off-center strike where part of the design is shifted and a crescent of blank metal shows at the edge, making the coin instantly eye-catching to anyone who encounters it. But the real kicker could be that the coin was struck as a mule error, meaning the obverse of the Lincoln cent was paired with the reverse intended for a completely different denomination, perhaps a Jefferson nickel reverse, creating a coin so bizarre and unique that its very existence would rewrite error coin reference books. And then imagine it survives not in circulated condition but in pristine mint state, perhaps MS68 red, with full blazing copper luster, no distracting spots or marks, and all the details crisp as the day it was struck. Such a specimen could have been saved the very day it was made, maybe pulled by a mint worker or spotted by a bank teller before it ever hit circulation, and kept in careful storage for over 50 years. Then when it finally surfaces in the hands of a major grading service, it not only receives a top grade but is certified as genuine, instantly becoming the object of intense bidding wars among advanced-era collectors, Lincoln cent variety specialists, and high-net-worth investors looking for a trophy coin that no one else in the world owns. And this is where the valuation climbs into the million-dollar territory, because while plenty of coins are rare, absolute uniqueness combined with stunning visual appeal and perfect preservation is what drives the very highest prices. And with the 1971 descent, the historical timing adds to the appeal. It came just before the U.S. Mint transitioned away from hand-punched mint marks and before the shift to zinc-based cents in the early 80s, making it part of the last era of fully traditional Lincoln cent production. And when you combine that nostalgia factor with the mystique of an impossible-seeming mint blunder, you get the kind of coin that transcends its face value entirely, turning what was once just another penny into a million-dollar piece of history, art, and pure collector desire. Continuing with the saga of the extraordinary 1971 Lincoln cent that could command a jaw-dropping $1 million, let's push even deeper into the minute details and the imaginative but plausible sequence of events that could have birthed such a treasure, because in the vast ocean of Denver's 1971 output, over 2.5 billion cents, there is always that minuscule possibility of a single coin emerging with such a perfect storm of anomalies that it elevates itself into the upper stratosphere of numismatic desirability, starting perhaps with an improperly prepared planchet, not just a simple off-metal error but one involving a foreign coin blank left over from a mint contract with another country, possibly a planchet meant for a brass or bronze coin from Central America or Asia, slightly smaller or lighter than a standard cent. And this planchet might have slipped into the hopper unnoticed, where it was struck by Lincoln cent dies that were already flawed with strong double die characteristics on the obverse, giving the lettering and the date a distinct shadowing effect. Now layer on another quirk, a reverse die that had begun to develop a die crack along the Lincoln Memorial steps, resulting in a raised line of metal cutting through the design, and perhaps the coin was even struck slightly off-center, with about 10 to 15% of the blank metal showing along one edge, enough to be dramatic but still leaving the date and mint mark intact and readable. The visual combination would be so distinctive that even someone with no numismatic background could tell it was something unusual, yet somehow this specimen avoids the scrutiny of mint inspectors, is bagged with thousands of normal cents, and makes its way into circulation, only to be spotted almost immediately by someone with a keen eye, maybe a bank teller, coin shop owner, or a collector who regularly searched rolls from the bank, and rather than spending it, they set it aside, tucking it into a small envelope or coin flip where it remains undisturbed for the next half-century. Over those decades it escapes the usual wear, corrosion, and environmental damage that plague most era coins, keeping its blazing copper-red luster and sharp details, until one day it is rediscovered and submitted to a major grading service like PCGS or NGC, where the graders not only confirm the authenticity of the multiple errors but also assign it an astonishingly high mint state grade, perhaps MS68 red, a grade so rare for era coins that it alone pushes the desirability through the roof. And then the coin's story begins to spread, first in niche era coin publications, then on major numismatic websites, and eventually even in mainstream media, sparking the familiar penny worth a fortune headlines that capture the public imagination. Once it is consigned to a high-profile auction, the heavy hitters of the coin collecting world start to circle, because owning this coin would not only be a status symbol but also an investment piece with the potential to appreciate further, especially given the increasing global interest in U.S. coinage and the finite supply of truly unique mint errors. And when the hammer finally falls, the winning bidder is not just paying for a lump of copper, they are paying for a slice of U.S. mint history, a marvel of mechanical misfortune, and a conversation piece that will intrigue collectors for generations to come. And that is exactly how a humble 1971 descent could legitimately find itself valued at $1 million, proving once again that in the right combination of rarity, condition, and sheer improbability, even the most common-looking coin can become a legend.